What's up, guys? This is the man of Intro Mind Productions, and I kind of wanted to talk about this story because I'm a big comic book movie fan. I'm a movie buff in general, but when these recent years, I've been pretty big with the MCU, and I've been following this story. Spider-Man, as of today, released. This is a story by Variety, released today, September 27th, 2019. Spider-Man will stay in the MCU. So this is big news because kind of want to go back to a story from a couple months ago. Well, not like a couple of months, but last month. Between, Spider-Man, Marvel, and Sony kind of having a, what's the word for it? Kind of just, going their separate ways in terms of Spider-Man. Basically it all kind of came down to money. So like, basically last month, if you're not familiar with the story, Sony, this is a story by Deadline. Sony Pictures, they were talking with Marvel about what to do with Spider-Man because Spider-Man was part of the MCU. They came up with a deal where Spider-Man would be in the MCU for 5 MCU movies. So that included Civil War, Homecoming, Infinity War, Endgame, and Far From Home. So recently, Sony's been kind of, getting their Spider-Man game back up a little bit, if I would say. Venom did really well. It made a lot of money. I liked Venom. I know a lot of people don't like Venom, and if you would say, Venom's a piece of shit movie, it's trash, whatever, I'm not going to argue with that, but I had a lot of fun with Venom. I genuinely thought it was a good movie. Into the Spider-Verse did really well, won an Academy Award, made a lot of money. It was just a different film, I didn't think it was amazing, but I did think it was good. And Homecoming was good, everybody loves Tom Holland as Spider-Man. A lot of people are saying, he's a good mix between Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. I'm not going to get into that, but regardless, everybody likes Tom Holland as Spider-Man. Homecoming and Far From Home have been doing really well, and Far From Home it's made over $1 billion. It's the first Spider-Man movie to reach that goal. And let me actually see how much money it made. So Far From Home made over $1 billion. That this much right here. So Sony's was in a good stance for Spider-Man. I'm not saying they didn't need Marvel, because when it comes to good Spider-Man movies, like say Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2, and Into the Spider-Verse, of course, and Homecoming and Far From Home. That's what I would consider good Spider-Man movies. Spider-Man 3 was okay. Amazing Spider-Man was okay. Amazing Spider-Man 2 was pretty bad. But when Sony gives their directors and their filmmakers creative freedom to do what they want with the character, it usually turns out pretty good. And I don't know if that was the case for Venom, but like I said, I enjoyed Venom. And it looked like they were focusing on the character of Venom. But anyway, back in August, Marvel and Sony were trying to come up with, negotiate of keeping Spider-Man in the MCU and what to do with him for the future. But according to the article, sources say, and I think it has been confirmed, but sources maintain that, Feige's exit, it was about money. It was about Disney seeking the 50-50 co-fi stake. Sources said the original Disney ask was more reasonable, as the price for Marvel and Feige's continued guiding hand that resulted in the delivery of Sony's biggest grossing film ever. Sony declined to meet those terms or even counter with anything worth considering. And I think the reason why is because Disney had like 5%. Sony, wanted to stay within the current terms of the deal, which was, I'm pretty sure it was 5%. Let me see if I can find it here in this article. Oh, look at that! I can't find it. But anyway, it was Disney had 5% of like the opening gross. So whatever how much money the movie, like the new Spider-Man movie, would make in the opening weekend, Disney or Marvel, I would say, would keep 5% of that, and merchandising and everything. and Sony would just keep the rest. So it's not the best deal. And on top of that, Marvel didn't have complete control over all of, the characters. That's why I feel like we're not really seeing Norman Osborn or Harry Osborn or even like MJ and Ned. That's not how the characters looked or how they were portrayed in the original comics. That's a whole another story. But basically Disney wanted 50-50. And Sony pretty just said, fuck you, we're out. And they just left. They just took Spider-Man out of the, just completely took Spider-Man out of the deal. And if you haven't seen Far From Home, a lot of Marvel fans, and a lot of fans in general were upset by this. Far From Home, I'm not going to spoil it, but it had a big ending. Like this ending, if you haven't seen Far From Home, some big things happen in the post-credits scene, and it's so big it would change the MCU forever going forward. So it was a pretty big, not necessarily risk, but like the way that movie ended, it just left so many possibilities open, and I was really excited to see what the heck was going to happen now, or was going to happen next. But unfortunately, Sony was like, he's out. And honestly, I was on Sony's side. I wasn't on Disney's side. Recently, Disney haven't been doing very well, specifically with Lucasfilm. Phase 4 of the MCU, I'm not too excited about it. Some of their TV shows were just like, to me, why would you pick like this Miss Marvel or this Captain Marvel? They're talking about redoing She-Hulk's backstory because of, I don't know, Men Bad. Black Widow, I'm just not really excited for Black Widow because it's just like, why wasn't this movie here like back in 2016 or something? Like Black Widow could have come out, Black Widow could have really come out in like right after Age of Ultron or right after Ant-Man or whatever, which could have tied into Civil War, because I think there's like a story between Black Widow and Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier. And, they could have done something with that, in my opinion. But, and then I think, like, the writers, they're not really familiar. The writer or the director of Black Widow, she said she's not really familiar with comic book films. And I'm just like, why would they pick this chick? But the movie's not out, so I can't say much. I'm a little worried about it, but Marvel's in a good standing where if it does bad, it's like they can pick themselves back up. And I'm gonna see it, so we'll see. We'll see. I guess it takes place after Civil War. But anyway, back to the Spider-Man story. So Spider-Man was kicked out of Marvel's hands, and the reason I sided with Sony is because, like I said, Disney is just becoming way too greedy with Lucasfilm and the way they're handling Star Wars. And which is another story. They seem to care more about the brand than the actual story and the characters, both their new characters and the old characters. With MCU's Phase 4, not hearing a lot of good things about it. And they already have everything. There were 6 major film studios. There were 6 major film studios before Disney bought Fox. Before Disney bought Fox, there was Universal, there was Disney, there was Warner Brothers, Columbia Pictures, Paramount, and 20th Century Fox. And now there's 5 because Disney, like I said, have bought out one of the other film studios. So it's just like, how big can you get? There used to be 6 and now there's 5. So, and Disney already owns pretty much every single Marvel character, but they don't own Spider-Man, which is the biggest Marvel character. So they're kind of in a predicament there. And unfortunately, since they didn't have Spider-Man, for me, I'm just like, Disney, you've got everything already. Like, what more do you want? Why do you keep digging your hand too deep into the money? You're literally like Scrooge McDuck. That's basically what Bob Iger is. He's Scrooge McDuck, and he just, or maybe Kevin Feige or whatever. But and Sony, they were in a good position. Like I said, Into the Spider-Verse won an Academy Award. Venom did well. Far From Home made over $1 billion. Sony probably said like, you know what? Maybe we can do this on our own. Maybe we could, just take Spider-Man and do what we want with him, and we don't need Marvel's help. So with that, with this news story now, Spider-Man staying in the MCU, to me, when I first saw the story today, the first thing that popped into my mind was like, okay, Sony couldn't do it. They didn't have the confidence in themselves to say, you know what, we can do Spider-Man, as much as we want. Or we can do Spider-Man our own way. I don't feel like they had the confidence to produce Spider-Man on their own. They needed Disney. They needed their creative. They needed Marvel. They needed those creative minds. On the other hand, you could say where Disney is, with I think Lucasfilm and Star Wars was losing money. There was a story about Kevin Feige producing a story for Lucasfilm, a Star Wars film, and I don't know, maybe Disney's like, hey, Sony, you wanna reach maybe a 25% deal? And I guess, they agreed for that. But according to the story, previously, it was on a 50-50 basis, and then, here we go. Sony was believed to have proposed keeping the arrangement under the current terms, which was basically Marvel receives about 5% first dollar gross and all merchandising revenues. So now, the new deal was signed late on Thursday night. Negotiations involved top players from both studios, including Tom Rothman, Kevin Feige, and Walt Disney co-chairs Alan Horn and Alan Bergman. In exchange for lending Feige's producing prowess, Marvel and Disney will receive roughly 25% of the profits, according to insiders. Disney will retain its merchandising rights and will put up roughly a quarter of the financing. Okay, as part of the arrangement, Spider-Man will also appear in one future Marvel Studios film. Hopefully that will be a Spider-Man film, because there is another rumor where Brie Larson, well, not Brie Larson, but they want Spider-Man and Captain Marvel to team up, and they're going to use Spider-Man to kind of prop up Captain Marvel and make her appear more enthusiastic instead of just, writing her better. But again, that's another story. And the film, they already have a release date for the film, which is July 16th, 2021. So it feels like the Marvel already had this Spider-Man film planned out, and Sony kind of fucked up their plans a little bit, and Marvel just needs to get things back on track. So I don't know if they went to Sony first or if Sony went to them first. But let me actually read the article, to know, actually, to back up what I'm saying. So on Friday, I believe this Friday, the two companies jointly announced that Marvel Studios and its president Kevin Feige will produce a third film. Blah, blah, blah. So I guess let's just say they both got together. Blah, blah, blah. Kevin Feige says, "I'm thrilled that Spidey's journey in the MCU will continue. And I and all of us at Marvel Studios are very excited that we get to keep working on it. Spider-Man is a powerful icon and hero whose story crosses all ages and audiences around the globe. He also happens to be the only hero with a superpower to cross cinematic universes. So as Sony continues to develop their own Spideyverse, you never know what surprises the future might hold." What the fuck does that mean? Okay, so it appears that Sony's still doing their Spider-Verse film, which I think you can do, but Sony needs to put it in the hands of competent, creatively strong producers and directors and writers. For the love of God. For the love of God. And, Amy Pascal was equally euphoric in her statement. "This is terrific. Peter Parker's story took a dramatic turn in Far From Home, and I cannot be happier. We will all be working together as we see where his journey goes." So there's another article that that's kind of a response to this one, this Spider-Man returning to the MCU. Where with this story, Spider-Man's returning to the MCU, but there's another story that's saying that by Screen Rant, Marvel reportedly planning to write Spider-Man out of the MCU. So this is kind of new. This is definitely new for me. Apparently, they came to agreement where basically they said, okay, let's make one more Spider-Man film, one more MCU Spider-Man film where we'll take Spider-Man out of the MCU and we can cement him into, Sony's Spider-Man verse. Which I said I think can't happen because, look, say what you want about Iron Man and Thor and Captain America. We all love these characters, but we've been loving Spider-Man since like the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. Like, Spider-Man's just not necessarily too big to fail, but he's the most popular Marvel character, one of the most popular superheroes of all time. Sony really don't need Marvel. Well, they kind of do. They need their people. But as long as they have that character, I'm not saying Marvel's screwed or fucked, but Sony has got a lot of leverage. They have Green Goblin. They have such a big rogues gallery. They can do like a live action Spider-Verse kind of thing. They can have a Gwen Stacy movie or a Spider-Ham. Have Kingpin be like one of the villains. Sinister Six, there's just so many possibilities. There's so many Spider-Man stories. And then the Spider-Man PS4 game, which everybody loved. That was Sony. So let's read the story. Marvel may be planning to wrap up Spider-Man's story in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as part of the most recent agreement between Disney and Sony. Even though the latter owns the rights to the web slinger, Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige have been helping craft the character on the big screen for the last 4 years. So just recapping. It's been a key to the MCU, especially with Tony Stark's arc. I can't talk today. While it appeared that Spidey's future could be with both universes, he may instead be written out of the MCU before too long. Expanding upon the details of the latest agreement, The Hollywood Reporter shared this significant piece of information about Spidey's future. They've shared that while some believe the deal could be extended again, others think this could be part of Spidey's actual MCU exit. So I guess this is just rumors, not really concrete yet, that this agreement is about Spider-Man leaving the MCU for good, at least for now, I guess. There's reportedly a sense from some that Feige seems to be plotting an endgame that will wrap up Peter Parker's story in the MCU. This would give Sony full control of the character once more. This reported plan of Feige's has yet to be confirmed, but it does make a great deal of sense for everyone involved. I guess one of the biggest complaints on the sudden stoppage of Marvel's involvement in the Spider-Man franchise was that Spider-Man Far From Home wasn't a natural end to his MCU story, obviously. If you watch the post-credit scene, you'll understand what that means. While Marvel may prefer to have Spider-Man back forever, that is not realistic. Okay, this new deal and plan would give Spider-Man 2 more appearances in the MCU before the event movie appearance ends with him no longer part of the universe. So is he going to be in one movie or is he going to be in more? I'm confused. Okay, so where's this ink? The ink on this new Spider-Man deal has only been dry for a few hours at this point, as his exit of the MCU is at least 3 years away, if not more. The MCU's plans or circumstances of Sony and Spider-Man could change dramatically between now and then, as much as people believe that the MCU is completely planned out. Feige's long-term vision is very fluid, so he may currently be planning to write Spider-Man out of the universe by the end of this deal, but who knows if that will stick or what future it could hold if this does happen. So it's unclear. It's kind of unclear, we know that Spider-Man's gonna return to the MCU, but how long is he gonna be there is anybody's guess. How do I feel about this personally? Story-wise, I'm happy because I really just want to see the continuation of that Far From Home storyline, to see after the ending, to see where that goes. That's mainly what I want them for. This is mainly why I want Spider-Man in the MCU. Why I don't want Spider-Man in the MCU, or why I don't care that Spider-Man would be with Sony, is because Disney, I don't know. I just don't really trust them. I'm gonna be honest. I don't really trust Disney. They're greedy. They want too much money. I'm not saying Sony's, the better deal, particularly, but if they're true to Spider-Man, and they make Spider-Man films because they love to make it, but we know it's film's a business and blah 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 and all that stuff. So I just didn't trust Disney, man. Especially what they're doing with Star Wars. I love Star Wars, and I'm not too happy about what they're doing with it. And with where the MCU is, a lot of people saying, the MCU, like, it's over after Endgame. I don't think that's true. They could always, Marvel could always change things up. They can always get back on their feet, but we'll see. We'll see. But with Spider-Man out, I was kind of like seeing, okay, Marvel, like, what are you gonna do now? Let's be more creative. Let's take some risks. Let's come up with something new. But everybody's ecstatic that Disney continues to have more control over everything. When people talk about the 1% of the 1%, or just the 1%, that's Disney. That's Disney. They bought one of the major film studios. Now there's only 5. That's a big deal. Everybody was so happy that X-Men and Fantastic Four, myself included, I'm gonna be honest, myself included, everybody was so happy those characters were coming back to the MCU that they didn't really think about everything else Disney was gonna get from Fox. So we'll see where this goes. I don't know. I'm a bit of a cynic. I'm not gonna get my hopes up too much. If you're happy about this, that's great. But leave your thoughts in the comments. This is just a neat kind of video I wanted to do. Might do more in the future. Seeing how people take this, talk about more movie stuff, some random stuff, not just Spider-Man, but some other other things. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoy, and I hope you guys have a good one.